Welcome to my channel, Midsummer Myths, where true stories twist into something stranger than fiction, and neighborly smiles can hide the sharpest knives. Today's tale, it's about Fireand, how one woman's arrogance turned my life into a smoldering ruin, only for fate to put her exactly where she never expected to be. If you think you've heard crazy HOA stories before, wait until you hear how mine ends. It was a warm Thursday afternoon in early September, the kind where the lake breeze dances through your windows and the sun dips gold over the water. I'd been living in my lakefront home for 12 years, a place I'd poured every spare dollar, every drop of sweat, and every ounce of pride into. It wasn't just a house. It was the dream I'd built after years of grinding work in a downtown law office. The porch overlooked the water, the cedar siding smelled like summer, and I knew every creak in the floorboards by heart. But our neighborhood wasn't all peace and serenity. There was the HOA, and more specifically, there was Marlene, our self-appointed president, though the term felt more like dictator. If you've ever met someone who uses the word violation more than hello, you already know the type. For months, Marlene had been on my case. At first, it was the little things: my dock was too long, my boat was too loud, and my lawn, apparently, didn't meet HOA height standards. Then it escalated. She'd leave passive-aggressive notes taped to my door with phrases like, "We all must keep the neighborhood safe and beautiful." Translation: do exactly what I say. It was laughable at first. I'd been a lawyer for 20 years. I knew the HOA bylaws inside and out. I wasn't breaking any rules, and she hated that. She couldn't corner me with fines. The more she realized I wasn't an easy target, the more obsessed she became. One night, I heard her talking to another board member during a community meeting. I was standing just outside the clubhouse door, and her voice carried, "Some people think they're above the HOA, but we can make their lives miserable if we want to." I should have taken that as the warning it was. The final straw, at least, before everything went up in flames, came when she demanded I remove my backyard fire pit. She claimed it was unsafe and a wildfire risk. That was rich coming from the woman who left her own grill sitting right next to her wooden deck. I told her, very plainly, that my fire pit was built to code, inspected, and permitted by the county. She didn't like that answer. The next week, my security cameras caught her pacing in front of my property in the early morning hours, phone in hand, snapping pictures of my house like she was building some kind of case file. The footage made my skin crawl. Something about the way she looked at my home like it was a personal enemy set my instincts on high alert. Still, I didn't expect what came next. It was 2 nights later when I woke to the unmistakable crackle of wood splitting in heat. At first, I thought it was a dream, but then the air hit me thick, choking, and hot. The smoke alarms blared, and the glow outside my bedroom window was bright, angry orange. My house was on fire. I stumbled out, grabbing my phone and yelling for my dog, heart hammering so hard it felt like it might burst. The flames were already climbing the siding, licking at the roofline. My neighbors were outside, shouting, some calling 911, others running for hoses. But it was too far gone. The fire chief later told me it burned so fast because it had been helped along. Accelerant, intentional. Someone had started it. And while I didn't have proof, yet I already knew in my gut exactly who had done it. As I stood there in the middle of the street, watching years of my life collapse into embers, Marlene stood just down the block, arms crossed, no phone in her hand, no panic in her face. Just that smug little smirk she always wore when she thought she'd won. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't just another HOA victim. And if she'd lit this fire, she'd just set her own life ablaze too. Asterisk, you ever had a moment where your whole life flips in seconds, and yet you're already plotting your next move before the smoke even clears? That was me standing barefoot in the street, my house reduced to ash, already deciding that whoever did this was going to pay. The fire department worked for hours, but by dawn, the place was a blackened skeleton. My dog and I were safe-shaken, coughing, but alive. Everything else, gone. Furniture, clothes, photo albums, my law library, all reduced to ash and twisted metal. The smell of smoke clung to my skin, and I couldn't wash it off. While the fire investigators combed through the wreckage, I stood with Officer Morales, someone I'd known from years back. He spoke quietly, like he didn't want to tip his hand. They're saying accelerant. We'll run lab tests, but this doesn't look like an accident. I didn't say her name out loud. I didn't have to. He gave me a look that said, I think we're both thinking the same thing. I went to stay with my sister for the next few nights. The morning after the fire, Marlene sent an HOA-wide email that made my blood boil. It read, Neighbors, it is with great sadness that I inform you of the unfortunate incident at 14 Lakeshore Drive. While this is a reminder that fire safety must always be our top priority, we must also remember that unapproved fire pits pose serious dangers to our community. She couldn't even wait 24 hours before spinning the tragedy into her propaganda, and she slipped in that little unapproved fire pit lie knowing full well mine had been legally cleared by the county. What she didn't know was that I still had my security footage saved to the cloud. Footage from 2 nights before the fire. Footage of her walking along my property line, holding what looked suspiciously like a gas can. I sent a copy straight to Detective Jensen, the lead on my case. He told me it was circumstantial clear, but not conclusive enough to arrest her without more evidence. We need her in the act, he said. That was fine. I could wait. But patience doesn't mean doing nothing. I quietly started digging in favors from friends in private investigation, pulling public records, and even talking to a few of her former HOA board members. Turns out, Marlene had a trail of petty vendettas in every neighborhood she'd lived in before ours. But the real jackpot came when I learned she had a pending court case, small claims against a contractor. The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. That detail might have seemed irrelevant to most people, but I was already building the trap in my head. Because you see, in my other life, before I was just the guy on the lake, I was an attorney who specialized in property damage and liability. And this case she had, it wasn't just small potatoes. It was about to blow wide open into something she couldn't wriggle out of. Asterisk, sometimes revenge isn't about shouting. It's about walking into a room where your enemy thinks they're in control, and watching the color drain from their face when they realize they're not. By Monday, I'd filed an emergency motion with the court to appear as co-counsel in the contractor's case against Marlene. It wasn't difficult. He'd been badly burned by her refusal to pay for a job she'd approved. And when he heard what she'd done to me, he was more than happy to let me sit second chair. That Tuesday morning, I walked into the courthouse, wearing the same tailored charcoal suit I'd worn to win a dozen big cases. My sister had pressed it the night before. I could feel the weight of my briefcase in my hand, familiar, grounding. And then I saw her. Marlene was sitting at the plaintiff's table, flipping through a manila folder, clearly rehearsing whatever self-righteous speech she'd prepared. When her eyes landed on me, walking toward the defense table, I swear her smirk cracked for the first time in years. "Mr. Jensen," she said, voice shaking just slightly. "No," I replied calmly. "Counsel for the defense." Her face drained. I didn't have to raise my voice. I didn't even have to glare. Just my presence in that courtroom sent the message, "I'm not done with you." The hearing started, and I played my role to perfection, polite, precise, methodical. Every time she tried to twist the facts, I countered with documented evidence. When she denied certain payments, I produced bank records. When she claimed unsafe work, I presented inspection reports, clearing the contractor's work completely. The judge saw right through her. And though this wasn't my fire case yet, the effect was the same. Her credibility was shredded in a public forum. She lost the case, was ordered to pay the contractor in full, and stormed out without looking at me. But that wasn't the end. Because before she reached the courthouse door, Detective Jensen was waiting in the hallway with 2 uniformed officers. And from the look on his face, I knew the lab results had come in. Asterisk. The thing about justice is, it doesn't always come when you want it. But when it does, you savor every second. Marlene Jacobs. Detective Jensen's voice echoed in the hallway. "You're under arrest for suspected arson and property destruction." The entire corridor went silent. People slowed their steps, whispers spread, and me. I just stood a few feet away, watching as the woman who had spent years trying to control everyone else's lives now had her wrists cuffed in front of the same courthouse where she'd just been humiliated. Her voice shot up an octave as she screamed, "This is a mistake. He set me up. This is all lies." But the officers moved her along, ignoring her protests. Jensen gave me a small nod as they passed. "Got her on residue from the gas can. It's enough to charge." That night, I slept for the first time since the fire. It wasn't overcooked. Cases never are, but the scales had tipped. Over the next few months, her arrogance crumbled piece by piece. Her mugshot made the local paper. The HOA board voted her out in an emergency session. Neighbors who once cowered under her constant threats now crossed the street to thank me. But my favorite part came during the pre-trial depositions. Sitting across from her in a quiet conference room, I watched her try to wriggle out of answering direct questions. Every "I don't recall" was met with another piece of evidence: security, footage, witness statements, and lab reports. It was like cornering a rat in a shrinking box by the time the trial date rolled around. Her attorney approached mine with a deal: pled guilty to a lesser charge, pay restitution, and avoid prison. She took it, probably thinking she'd won something, but the restitution, that covered every penny of my rebuild, plus enough for me to install the biggest, most fireproof outdoor kitchen you've ever seen. Asterisk. Sometimes victory doesn't look like gloating. Sometimes it's just standing on your rebuilt porch, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over the water, knowing the person who tried to destroy you can't touch you anymore. A year after the fire, my house stood against rock, better and impossible for the HOA to complain about. I'd rebuilt with metal roofing, stone siding, and the kind of security system that would have made a bank jealous. The HOA, they'd replaced Marlene with a far more reasonable president, a retired teacher named Linda, who made it clear she had no interest in micromanaging people's flower beds. The neighborhood started to feel like a community again. Every so often, I'd see Marlene around town. Never in our neighborhood, of course. She'd moved out months earlier. Without her title, without her board seat, she was just another face. At the grocery store, she never looked at me. I never needed her to. Because the truth is, she gave me more than she took away. She thought she was breaking me down, but in reality, she gave me the perfect reminder that I'd built my life on something stronger than walls and wood. I'd built it on grit, on refusing to bow to bullies, on knowing the law well enough to use it against the very people who thought they could twist it to hurt others. And as I stood on that porch one quiet morning, the lake calm and glassy, my dog sitting beside me, I couldn't help but smile. Not because she'd been punished, though that was satisfying, but because, in the end, she had to walk into my courtroom, play by my rules, and lose everything she'd used to try to destroy me. That's the thing about fear, it doesn't care who it burns. And when you're the one holding the match, you'd better be ready for the smoke to come back your way. Asterisk, and that, my friends, is how a so-called HOA enforcer learned the hard way that playing with fire literally can burn your whole world down. If you enjoyed this wild ride, don't let it end here. Hit that like button, subscribe for more jaw-dropping HOA and revenge stories, and ring the bell so you never miss the next one. Trust me, the next story is even crazier.